The story is just breaking earlier today. Pava Marie Lepere, 26, murdered in Baltimore apartment, is a Forbes 30 under 30 tech CEO who launched a $7 million eco company. Now, the first thing I want to say is it's a horrifying story. And I feel for my condolences to the friends and family of this young woman who apparently had launched a successful tech company. And of course, you know that the subject matter that I'm going to be discussing is going to be crime in big cities, which is why I highlight this is a woke female tech CEO who was murdered. Now, I want to make sure it's clear for all of you. We don't know the circumstances around what happened. And this woman, it may have been someone she knows. And even in the best of times, in the most secure of times, there's nothing you can really do if you invite someone to your house you trust and then a bad thing happens. It's also true that even if you're home by yourself and the door is kicked in by a violent criminal who's been stalking you, calling the police can only do so much. My point is simply this. You need friends. You don't want to live alone. You need to be able to defend yourself. None of these things are perfect. None of these things will stop violent criminals intent on causing you harm. And what do you do in an apartment building, when you're being attacked? I think this is why we have a right to keep and bear arms. And I think it's particularly important for women. So I will stress the issue at hand that I will be commenting on is not to criticize this woman for anything other than her ideology. And that is to say, there's no guarantee that any change in her ideology would result in anything other than what happened so far, because we don't know the details. My point is simply this. You align yourself with a faction of people that vote to take away your right to defend yourself. And I believe that you are opening the door for these problems. You align yourself with people who vote for releasing criminals onto the street. You increase the rate of violent crime. Now, again, we don't know the circumstances. The story is quite simple. Pava Marie Lepere, 26, murdered in Baltimore apartment. They say no suspects have been arrested, and cops have not revealed any possible motives. According to her social media, Lepere was born in Tucson, Arizona, and was single. So the first thing I want to say is, look, you're allowed to be single. I got no issue with that. I do want to stress, it's not typical of American society and human society for people to be single. And so you are much less likely to encounter things like this when you live with someone else. However, I will also add, men do beat their wives more so than women beat their husbands. And there have been circumstances like this even when women are not single, right? They say under her leadership, the Baltimore-based tech startup raised a total of $7 million of funding in the last 18 months. Officers arrived around 11:34 a.m. to her apartment complex. Upon arrival, they found her dead. She had signs of blunt force trauma. The medical examiner's office took possession of the body pending examination. According to investigators, there had been a missing persons call made for her a short time before she was discovered. Chris McNeese, a tenant of the building, told WJZ, "It's pretty horrifying. I mean, just for that to happen anywhere in the city is obviously a bad thing, but it's hard to imagine why this would happen specifically in this building." Lepere lived in an apartment building, the former site of the Congress Hotel, where a one-bedroom is $1,500. You can see that she was featured in Forbes 30 under 30. She has a bunch of photos. And I think it's important to point out that this is a woke individual, because my warning to all of you is pay attention to these stories and let's figure out how we prevent things like this from happening. This is not a gun death. It's a blunt force trauma death. It may be that this was someone she was dating or rejecting. It may be that it was a stalker. It could be that it was a family member. Who knows? Could be a neighbor. No idea. There may be no real solution to something like this happening, but I think it's worth bringing up because crime is running rampant to an extreme degree, and we do not want anyone to be made an example of. I want this woman. I wish that she succeeded in her company, improving the lives of people around her through technology. But instead, we consistently get these activists that ignore the plight in these cities, the crime in these cities, resulting in more crime in these cities. They're going to mention Lepere said her workforce is 50% female, 50% people of color. Her clients include the Aspen Institute, Meta, WXR Fund, T-Row, etc. Our proprietary tech allows us to create platforms that are pre-populated with information about resources, etc., etc. And of course, over on her social media, she does have a call out in support of Black Lives Matter. Now, I want to stress, it may be generic, right? The support that she puts out, these statements, she may know nothing about any of this stuff. But this is still the banality of the current political state. Not necessarily anything this woman having done being evil. I'm just saying supporting these causes, which are fake, which are exploitative, which are manipulative, and which lead to policies that increase crime in our major cities is going to make more of these stories. And we do not want that. In this post, she says, venture capital, 80+% of VC firms don't have a single black investor. 30% of the top VC funds are white. Yeah, but all of this is just indicative of a majority white population. 30% of SBA loans go to black-owned businesses. She says, we all have a role to play. If you're not sure how you can contribute to building an anti-racist society, think about where your expertise and influence lie. For me, that's entrepreneurship. Anti-racist is a neo-Marxist concept. It does not mean you oppose racism. It means you support racial discrimination and segregation, just in a different way. And then we have this story, of course. CVS says it will close 900 stores by the end of 2024, 10% of all of its shops, as it moves to online strategy amid rampant increase in shoplifting. It's getting crazy, man. And so I see this story, and the first thing I thought, because I'm biased, was when I read about a woman being murdered in Baltimore, I said, I bet the woman is woke. I bet she is a woke Democrat supporting anti-racism and all of that stuff. Why? Well, she lives in Baltimore. I think it's a fair assessment. And so I just did a Google search. Even the article talks about her woke, anti-racist, Marxist policies. And my concern is these people who want to be seen, I don't care if you're a man or a woman. Okay, women obviously are more at risk because men tend to be the perpetrators of violence, tend to be the victims of violence. That's true. But a woman is less able to defend herself relative to a man. Yo, I don't care if you think that's sexist. Men tend to be taller, tend to have more muscle mass. Women need guns. And so I am sick of these stories. There should not be stories of women being victimized in this way. She should be allowed to espouse her views. But I tell you this, when you vote for people who vow to open up the prisons, let people out, more violent crime will happen. And the sad reality is, I will also add, I don't blame her. She's the victim. Okay? Some of her policies contributed to this, but to all the people who vote for policies that release criminals, this is what the result will be. Now, I don't believe, I'm not a fan of cash bail. This idea that someone gets arrested, they're not even convicted, and you lock them up. No, I'm not a fan of that. It used to be that you had a bail hearing, but they barely do this anymore because there's no time. Now they just say, pay the bail and get out, whatever. Okay, fine. Everybody gets bail, but you got to pay. Well, that's a problem. If the preponderance of evidence, or I should say your character history and everything, suggests you're a nonviolent offender, well, then let them go. And maybe we need to operate on more like a 3 strikes model. The problem I have with the system of cash bail is that there are people who are wrongly accused, go to jail, they can't go to work, they lose their jobs, they can't pay rent, things like that happen. Why? And then what happens? They get acquitted. Whoops, sorry, wrong person, and their life is destroyed. That's not okay. If you're not proven guilty, we shouldn't be able to lock you up unless we have a direct evidence that can be presented to the court that proves you're violent. And I'm not even super concerned about a flight risk. If you're a shoplifter and you're a flight risk, it's nonviolent. I don't think, so the issue is, let's say you're accused of shoplifting and then they're like, oh, this person's got money and a passport and the means to travel. That doesn't mean you're guilty of anything. But that being said, I fully recognize violent offenders you have to be detained. Otherwise, what happens? We can't have someone be arrested on a violent charge, released, and then go engage in violence. But that creates a very serious problem for us. How do we handle a system like this? I'd make the argument that people should be given hotel accommodations when they're in lockup pre-conviction. That is to say, if you're convicted, you go to jail. Jail is jail. But if you're being held without bond or you can't pay bond, you should be given access to the internet. You should be given a comfortable bed. You should be given good food. Oh, I know it's challenging because then you'll get people committing crimes just to get into these beautiful, nice systems. We can't afford it. Yep, it's tough. But I don't see how you justify someone who has not been convicted being placed in squalor and being forced to miss work and cut off from communication. No, I reject all of that. The system wants to lock someone up because they fear they're violent, but they haven't proven it. Then you've got to provide that person's basic standard of living. Long story short, man, whatever it is we're doing, it ain't working. And I think the real issue here is cultural. I think the woke narratives and all of that contributes to a culture of destruction outside of policy. And it brings sad stories just like this. I don't have the solutions for you, my friends, because like I said, I'll say it for the 5th time. Even if we had different policies or culture, murder happens. And there's no direct correlation between this woman being woke and whatever happened to her. It's not like one of those stories where it's like prison advocate gets attacked by prisoner they helped or something like that. It's like a woman who was a tech CEO happened to have posted woke stuff and believed in all this woke policy stuff, and then something bad happens to her. We don't know why. My point is simply, do not support these policies that weaken our ability to protect ourselves. How much do you want to bet the lady was in favor of gun control and all that? I wish she had a weapon to defend herself. I really do. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.